Welcome to the Avery Archives on YouTube, where we narrate public domain documents from the Steven Avery case. The following is a narration from day 1 of the Avery trial, the defense opening statements given by Attorney Strang. All narration is directly from the court records for educational purposes. This is Part 2. For a link to Part 1, see the description box below.
And Steven Avery calls her later, as a matter of fact, from his cell phone. Again, he calls her cell phone at about 4:35 that afternoon. Why? Because he thought, I've got another car I'd like to sell. I might as well, if she's still around, or if she can swing back, I might as well have her shoot that one too. But he doesn't get an answer from her. She doesn't answer the phone when he calls at 4:35. He sticks around. And at that point, his girlfriend, Jody, who was in jail serving some time for a drunken driving conviction, she's in the Manitowoc County Jail. Jody, you will learn, calls Steven regularly. Because she's in jail, she has to call collect. And you can't call collect from a jail to a cell phone. I don't know if you can call collect to any cell phone from anywhere. But in any event, you can't call from a cell phone from the jail calling collect. So you have to call a landline. So that's exactly what Jody does. First, a little bit after 5:30 in the evening, she calls. And jail systems, I don't know if you know this, but jail systems typically, and the Manitowoc County Jail clearly does this, they cut off phone calls after 15 minutes. Inmates have a lot of time on their hands. Sometimes people they're calling don't. So the call just ends at 15 minutes. So Jody calls a little bit after 5:30 on the landline, and then she calls again shortly before 9 p.m., and Steven's home. Steven answers the phone in his little red trailer there both times, and both of those conversations go 15 minutes, almost to the second. He tells her that he's been doing a little cleaning. He tells her that Brendan, his nephew, Brendan Dassey, is over. They hassle. These are inane conversations, honestly, but they're tape recorded because every phone call out of that jail is tape recorded, so we know they did happen. Does it sound like he's just killed someone? No. Does he hide the fact that his nephew Brendan, from 50 yards away or whatever it is, Barb's trailer has come over? No. Doesn't have to tell Jody that, if they were up to something no good, but he does. Brendan's around. And for all the world, as I say, these conversations are simply inane. They don't ring of someone who's committed a murder, or is in the midst of committing a murder, or in the midst of mutilating a corpse, or falsely imprisoning anyone. No screaming in the background. They're just inane telephone conversations between a squabbling boyfriend and a squabbling girlfriend. And October 31st comes to a close. It's about 3 days later, Thursday evening about 5 o'clock, November 3rd, when Mrs. Halbach reports Teresa missing. Teresa lives almost next door to the elder Halbachs. I mean, the two houses you can see from one and the other. One's on a dairy farm up north here in Calumet County. So the report goes to the Calumet County Sheriff's Department. It's a missing persons report. No one has seen Teresa since Sunday, actually. And the Calumet County Sheriff's Office responds, interviews the family, a couple of close friends, and learns very quickly about these 3 appointments that Teresa had on Monday. Now, at least 2 of those, maybe 3rd even, but at least 2 were in the Manitowoc County area, the Zipperers and Avery, or Bejanda. So, the Calumet County Sheriff's Department calls for help from the Manitowoc County Sheriff's Department on this missing persons report. That very night, 5 o'clock, the report is made. By the end of the dinner hour, Calumet County is calling Manitowoc County Sheriff's Department for a little bit of help. And who do we get? We get Sergeant Andrew Colburn. And he's told, look, 2 places we would sort of like to check out and see if Teresa Halbach showed up on Monday, the Zipperer residence and Steven Avery. Well, that's a name that rings a bell, you better believe. less than 3 weeks, or about 3 weeks, after his deposition. And it is interesting that of those 2 places that Sergeant Colburn is asked to check out and inquire after Teresa Halbach, he only goes to one. He goes to Steven Avery's home. And Steven cooperates with him, tells him essentially what I've told you about Teresa Halbach coming to take pictures of Barb Janda's van. He doesn't clam up, doesn't seem nervous, isn't uncooperative. That very night, November 3rd, around 7 o'clock, when Sergeant Colburn knocks on his door. Now, out of the blue, that same night, Lieutenant James Lank, now the head of the detective unit in Manitowoc County Sheriff's Department, calls Calumet about this missing person report. Now, at this time on Thursday night, November 3rd, this is, well, let's be clear, this is just a missing person report. A young woman who hasn't been seen in 3 days. It's in another county. It's not even Manitowoc County at all. And nobody has called for Lieutenant Lank. And nobody's called looking for him. But the chief detective of the Manitowoc County takes it upon himself that night to call Calumet and offer to get involved in the missing person investigation, where one of the appointments that was to be kept was Steven Avery. And the next morning, Lieutenant Lank does one better than that. He goes out himself to Steven Avery's trailer with another officer from Manitowoc. He knocks on that door again, just as Sergeant Colburn had done the night before, inquiring about Teresa Halbach. Again, Steven's cooperative. Lieutenant Lank asks, "Could I take a walk through your trailer? Can I look around? Do you mind?" "No, I don't mind. Come on in." Lieutenant Lank walks through Steven's trailer, sees nothing amiss, thanks him for his cooperation, and he leaves. November 5th, Saturday, Steven is left to go up to the family cabin early that morning, where Alan goes every weekend and most of the family goes up too. Steven has gone up on Saturday morning, but about 10:30 on Saturday morning, Pam and Nicole Sturm find the Toyota they suspect correctly, as it turns out, is Teresa's. As it turns out, is Teresa's in the far diagonal corner of the salvage yard from Steven Avery's trailer. So you might expect law enforcement officers to descend on the property, and the first to arrive are Manitowoc County Sheriff's Department officers at just about 11 o'clock in the morning on the nose. And folks, from that point forward, from 11 a.m. on Saturday, November 5th, 2005, this is not so much a funnel approach as you will see. It's a tunnel approach. It is a tunnel vision approach to this case. All of the feelings about Steven Avery, all of those churning emotions, all of that within the Manitowoc County Sheriff's Department, it just floods out. You can call it tunnel vision, you can call it investigative bias, but from that point on, this investigation is about Steven Avery and not much else. From 11 o'clock in the morning on Saturday, November 5th, 2005, before the police say that they have even opened the car, before they say they know of any blood of any sort in or on the car, before anyone even knows whether this young woman has been hurt or killed, the focus is on Steven Avery. Other people are asked, her male roommate, former boyfriend and current friend, Ryan Halagas, others are asked, "Do you know anything about her disappearance? Did you have anything to do with it?" All of them say no. And those denials, those statements are accepted, but not Steven Avery's. Not Steven Avery's denials or expressions of innocence. Time and time again, the police go back to Steven Avery and ask the same questions. And he talks to them every single time. Even by the time his lawyers in the civil lawsuit down in federal court in Milwaukee find out about it and are trying to encourage him not to talk to the police, he talks. On the 3rd to Colburn, on the 4th to Lenk, on the 5th to officers up in Crivets, on the 6th, on the 9th, he talks. And he is not believed. Do they want to go through his house? Sure. Come on in my house. On November 4th, Lieutenant Lenk. After the Toyota is found and the police arrive at about 11 o'clock that Saturday morning, Lieutenant Lenk and Sergeant Colburn come into work and they too arrive at the Avery property. You'll hear that Lieutenant Lenk now has changed his sworn version of when he arrived that afternoon. And he has the ability to change his sworn story about when he arrived that afternoon at the Avery property because somehow he avoided signing in on the log. The log sheets that the Calumet County Sheriff's Department was keeping a potential crime scene. He signed out, but somehow he managed not to sign in. And on that 40-acre parcel, after the Toyota has been turned over to the Division of Criminal Investigation in Madison, now as search efforts are to begin on that parcel, now as the Manitowoc County Sheriff's Department nominally turns over control of the investigation to Sheriff Jeffrey Pagel of the Calumet County Sheriff's Department, this county sheriff's department, nominally that afternoon, control of this investigation was turned over to Calumet from Manitowoc because of the apparent conflict of interest that Mr. Avery's lawsuit represents for the Manitowoc County Sheriff's Department. Now, if you're thinking, though, that the evidence will show you that the Manitowoc County bowed out because of the conflict of interest after it turned the investigation over to Calumet County, if you're thinking that, it's reasonable. But you are wrong. Manitowoc County Sheriff's Department stays very much involved in this investigation. And what does Lieutenant Lenk and what does Sergeant Colburn do by way of volunteering to help that very afternoon, that Saturday, November 5th? Do they volunteer to help look in the 4,000 cars? No. Do they volunteer to search Alan and Dolores Avery's home? No. How about the pole barns or the outbuildings of the salvage properties business itself? No. They volunteer to search Steven Avery's trailer, and they do, on November 5th. And once they get into that trailer with that search warrant, well, then what these two do, and there are 2 other officers with them, one from Manitowoc and one from Calumet, what Lenk and Colburn do is they say, "Don't worry, we'll take Steven's bedroom." And they search this bedroom. Now, this is a mobile home. The bedroom itself, if it's only 10 by 12 or 12 by 12 or 10 by 10, I would be surprised if it was much bigger than that. From me to the wall in front of you is about the depth and roughly the width of that bedroom in that small trailer in which Steven Avery lives. They search, well, that is, Lenk and Colburn search his bedroom on the night of November 5th, and they find nothing of interest. They see the guns, they stay on the wall. But don't bother seizing the guns on the 5th. Come back to those the next day. And it is Lenk and it is Colburn who come back that next day, not somewhere on the property, but to Steven Avery's trailer. On November 6th, they search his garage. The garage is actually between him and his sister Barb's trailer, but for our purpose here, let's call it his garage. You'll find out that the Dassey boys have access to that garage. Barb has access. The family all have access to this garage. But it's Lenk and Colburn and another detective from the Manitowoc County named Dave Remaker who searched the garage on Sunday, the 6th. They find 10, or maybe it's 11, something 10 or 11 spent .22 casings. And they pick all of those up. But remember,
Remember the bullet that's found under little tent number 9 on the picture that Mr. Kratz showed you? The bullet that's apparently in a crack on the floor, right smack in the middle of the garage near the front where the door is? Well, that no one sees or picks up on the 6th, on November 7th, November 8th, and so forth through November 12th. Neither does anyone see a bullet back under the air compressor. But you'll see in photographs of that garage, as it was in November 2005, not as it was in March 2006, when finally, lo and behold, why, there's the bullets! Why don't we pick up these bullets? You'll see the garage in photographs, not computer simulations, photographs, as it was in November 2005. You'll be able to see that though the garage is very cluttered, there's no clutter under that air compressor. There's no clutter there, where 4 months later someone finds a magic bullet there as you walk in the garage looking at that floor. November 7th, Steven Avery's trailer is searched again by guess who? Lenk and Colburn. Now, there's certainly over 50 law enforcement officers on this property 24 hours a day. Well, before November 7th, probably by sometime, late the night of the 5th, certainly by the 6th, there may be over 100 law enforcement officers working on this property. They have the family excluded. They have a perimeter around the entire 40 acres and more. They're controlling traffic and entry. They're logging in who comes and goes. They control this place. And as you heard Mr. Kratz say, they have any number of people searching. But it's Lenk and Colburn again who are searching Mr. Avery's trailer, there in the northwest corner of that salvage yard. And on November 7th, they find nothing of interest in his home. Tuesday, November 8th, they're back. They are back in Mr. Avery's home, back in that small bedroom, and now Lieutenant Lenk, on what you will hear is probably the 7th search of that small bedroom, Lieutenant Lenk now, when he's the only one in that room, says, "Why, my gosh, there's a key sitting in plain view next to the nightstand." There is. You saw the picture, as he says he found it. One solitary key on a ring connected to a fob. That key fob is just like, and probably is, the one that Teresa Halbach's younger sister bought her as a little present. One key and one key only on the ring connected to that, and it's a Toyota key. And the man whom the state would have you believe bled all over Teresa's car manages not to bleed on her key. His blood isn't found there, although apparently somehow DNA is, but not his fingerprints. And more interestingly, although this is a 1999 Toyota, and I gather she's been using this key, the state believes, every day to start her car and turn it on and off, Teresa Halbach's DNA and fingerprints are not found on her key. For good measure, on November 8th, Lieutenant Lenk and Sergeant Colburn searched Steven Avery's garage yet again. No bullets, no nothing. And the case against Steven Avery largely is made at that point. And a whole lot of it, as you'll see, depends on Lieutenant James Lenk and Sergeant Andy Colburn. And they, both of them, have elected never to tell Sheriff Jeffrey Pagel, the man in charge of the investigation for Calumet County. They have elected not to tell him that they had their depositions taken in Avery's case probably 3 weeks earlier. They didn't tell anybody in the Calumet County Sheriff's Department that. November 8th is also the day that the bone fragments are found in a burn area hardly 20 yards outside of Steven Avery's master bedroom window. Hardly 20 yards. Small burnt bone fragments, human burnt bone fragments. But what you will learn, and what you did not hear this morning, what you will learn is that the burnt human bone fragments also apparently are found in one of the burn barrels behind Barb Janda's house. Burnt the same way, fragmented about the same way, and apparently human in origin.
Not Steven Avery's burn barrel, not the one you heard about. But there are 4 burn barrels to the southeast. That's the most distant corner of Barb Janda's trailer from Steven Avery's trailer. 4 burn barrels back there for Barb Janda and the Dassey boys. Burnt bone fragments. And there are what seem to be probable human burnt fragment bones found in the gravel quarry, probably a quarter-mile south of Steven Avery's property. Now, I don't think the state has been able to link, through DNA analysis, those burnt bone fragments conclusively to Teresa Halbach. But how many burnt human bone fragments are there supposed to be? And when you only have one person missing, and the burnt human bone fragments in the Janda burn barrel, about which you did not hear this morning, those are fragments from bones that are not connected, not part of one limb, not connected to another within the human body. Sort of a random mix of bone fragments, as apparently are those that are found a quarter-mile to the south in the gravel pit. And as you piece this evidence together, here's what you're going to have to conclude. Bone fragments, parts of this body were found where they were not burned. They were burned and moved because, again, the fragments are not connected to one another. It's not that, it's not that an arm could have been removed and burned one place and the rest of the body in another place. We've got fragments themselves mixed up and found in 3 different places. The body couldn't have been burned in that way in 3 different places, or even 2. If you set aside the gravel pit, these bone fragments were moved. The question then becomes, the question you will have to decide eventually is, were they moved from Steven Avery's burn area to the Janda burn barrel? Or the gravel quarry? Or were they moved from somewhere else? To Steven Avery's burn area, and maybe to one of the other places where the bone fragments, burnt, are found. At least, did they start in the burn area and get moved somewhere else? Or did they start somewhere else, burned somewhere else, and get moved to the burn area? Now, experts here in what scientists will call thermal injuries to the bodies, cremation, an expert or two, to the extent that you hear, may be able to give you some help on that question, some help. But I'm not sure that an expert can answer this conclusively. In the end, you folks are going to have to do the hard work, and the hard thinking at that. But I think when you've heard it all, you'll conclude that it's least most likely, more probable, that the bones were moved to Steven Avery's burn area, not there and moved from another area or a place or two. Why? You are going to find out that there are better places, even on the Avery salvage yard property, in which to incinerate a body. The burn area is relatively flattened, scooped out a little bit, but it's relatively flat and open. It's a burn area like many farms or rural homes have. Just folks have burn barrels. It doesn't have well-developed sides to focus heat back inward on the fuel or things being burned. Neither does it have a ready external source of fuel. But the aluminum smelter at the Avery Auto salvage property does. Big propane jets, an enclosed area. It will take an aluminum transmission down to a liquid in just a few minutes. The wood furnace that heats the outbuildings in the Avery Auto salvage business, Chuck's home, Alan and Dolores' home, that's an enclosed area that will incinerate fuel very quickly. And because we have probable human burnt bone fragments found on the adjoining property, the gravel quarry to the south, we can't rule out other possible burn sites. And an expert won't be able to tell you what other possible burn sites there are. Expert or not, that's not something he or she will be able to tell you. But once it's more likely, as I think you'll find it to be more likely, that the body is burned somewhere else, and the bone fragments then are brought to Steven Avery's burn area, then he's not guilty. Because if he's the one who burned the body somewhere else, he's not going to bring the bones back, to dump them 20 yards outside his bedroom window. Neither is he going to dump a cell phone and a digital camera and a Palm Pilot In his own burn barrel. Too many other places where these things could have been disposed of out in the salvage yard, whether in the retention pond, whether in the gravel quarry, or some other burn barrel in the woods. So once you understand that those bones probably were not burned in that burn area, the fact that they're found there, you'll see tends to suggest he's not guilty. Not that he is.
Due to the length, we've broken the defense opening statements into multiple parts. You've just listened to part 2. Check the description box below for a link to the third part as well as the first. And while you're at it, feel free to subscribe to our channel, Avery Archives, as we'll be posting narrations of the entire trial and case files daily. Thanks so much. See you at part 3. Bye-bye.